The tent was dark, projector hummed. On screen, black and white film, grainy, shaking with the vibration of gun recoil. First plane filled the frame, fireball. Second wing folded, structure gone in 1 second. Third engine block shattered, propeller spun away into gray sky. The room went silent. The intelligence officer turned to Major William. His pencil had stopped moving a long time ago. 7 kills, 6 minutes. Pause. How? The answer started 13 hours earlier, Luzon. 11th, 1945, 7:00 hours. 7:00 hours. Major Williams sat in the cockpit of his Mustang, 2,000 feet above the jungle canopy of Luzon. Below him, the Philippines burned. Black smoke columns rose from villages into a gray sky. The jungle stretched in every direction, dense, dark, hostile, enemy territory in every sense. If he went down in there, nobody would find him for days. Above him, the Japanese Empire proved it wasn't finished. 13 shapes materialized out of the overcast. One massive bomber, a dark green skin, fat and slow. Surrounding it, 12 fighters in tight formation, buzzing around their bomber like angry wasps protecting a hive. Check the numbers, simple math, 13 of them. 2 of himself and his wingman, lieutenant, flying tight on his left flank. 2 planes against a full squadron. A death sentence. And to make it worse, was not supposed to be fighting at all. Before the war back in Pennsylvania, William had not been a college athlete or a racing driver. He had been a mortician, an undertaker. His days were spent preparing bodies for burial, working with the cold, quiet reality of how life ends. The other pilots called him the Flying Undertaker. The name fit. He didn't brag at the bar, didn't use his hands to fly imaginary air battles in the mess hall like the fighter jocks did. He just watched. He waited. With a patience that came from a profession where rushing meant mistakes. He understood death better than most men in uniform. He had touched it every day before the war, handled it, prepared it, respected it. Now he sat in a cockpit with 13 enemy planes closing in, and felt nothing but cold focus. The plane underneath him made his odds worse. On the outside, it looked like a P-51 Mustang, the legendary fighter tearing up skies across 2 oceans. Same Merlin engine, same clean lines. Same propeller that could drag the airframe at 400 miles per hour. Under the skin, a different machine entirely. The Army had gutted it, ripped out the main fuel tank behind the pilot's seat. In its place, cameras K-17 and K-22, heavy industrial machines full of glass lenses and steel gears. Engineers cut holes in the fuselage for the lenses to peer through. The result heavy, tail heavy. Sluggish, it flew like a racehorse carrying a sack of cement. Pull back on the stick to climb, the weight of the cameras dragged you down. Try a tight turn in a dogfight, the balance was all wrong. The plane was built to be a flying eye, not a flying gun. It still carried .650 caliber machine guns in the wings. But most commanders saw those as a last resort, defensive weapons meant to scare people off while you ran, not hunting tools. Was not flying a fighter, he was flying a camera with wings. For 3 years, men like him had been the laughingstock of the Army Air Forces. The real fighter pilots, the ones in P-38s and P-47s, had a name for reconnaissance boys, tourists. The kids. In the officer clubs back at base, fighter jocks slammed beers on the bar and bragged about their kills. Zeros turned into fireballs. Enemy fighters shredded at 500 yards. When a recon pilot walked in, the room went quiet. Then the jokes started. Had the tourists seen any nice scenery today? Got any pretty snapshots for the scrapbook? The meaning was clear. Fighter pilots were warriors, knights of the air. They did the killing and the dying. Recon pilots were spectators. They watched the war from a safe distance and carried cameras instead of courage. Hated that label. Hated the way other pilots looked at his plane, tapping the glass windows on the fuselage where the cameras sat, treating his machine like a toy. But he knew what the loudmouths ignored. Flying recon was not safe. It was a suicide run with a notepad. You flew low, straight into anti-aircraft fire to get the photographs the generals needed. flew steady and level while tracers climbed toward your cockpit. Because if you jinked, if you rolled, the photos came out blurry. Mission failed. The cameras that made him a tourist also made him a target, every single day. 3 years of that. And the stigma never lifted. The manual on his knee was specific about what to do next. When a reconnaissance pilot encounters a superior enemy force, the rule was simple. Use speed to survive. Take photographs if possible. Disengage. Report enemy position to base. Let a full squadron of real fighters handle it. He does not engage. He does not attack. He runs. Every recon pilot followed that rule. 3 years, every encounter, no exceptions. But this morning, watched the Japanese formation through his canopy glass, and something was wrong with them. The fighters drifted too far from the bomber, loose spacing, sloppy. They weren't checking their 6 o'clock, no urgency, no discipline. They flew like men who believed the war in this sector was already won. Maybe they saw the 2 American planes in the distance and made an assumption. 2 camera planes, harmless reconnaissance birds doing what they always did out here, looking and running. No threat, no reason to tighten formation. They were treating him like a joke. The same way the guys at the bar treated him. The same way the commanders treated him when they handed him a camera and told him to stay out of trouble. They looked at Major Bill and saw exactly what the label promised. A tourist. A cold switch flipped inside his head. Not angry, not emotional, something quieter than that, something colder. The same mechanical focus he had carried through 1,000 quiet afternoons in his old profession. The focus of a man who had spent years handling the end result of violence without flinching. Looked at the 13 planes again. Not aircraft anymore. Customers. Reached down, flipped the safety cover off the gun switch. Turned on the gun sight, the glowing reticle hummed to life on the glass in front of him. Right hand back on the stick, steady, breathing, even. The thumb found the microphone button on the throttle quadrant. The voice came out flat. Calm, no fear, no hesitation, no shout, no scream for backup. One sentence, one order. It violated every rule in the book. Stay with me. We're going down. The stick slammed forward. The nose of the F-6D dropped toward the jungle. The Merlin engine roared as the propeller bit into the humid air, picking up speed. The tourist was done taking pictures. The dive was not graceful, it was violent. When slammed the stick forward, the F-6D didn't glide, it fell. The extra weight of the K-17 cameras in the tail dragged the Mustang down, fighting the aerodynamics every inch. The airframe shuddered as the speed indicator wound past 300 miles per hour, then 350, then 400. The Merlin engine up front screamed, not the clean hum of a well-tuned machine, the roar of a factory floor running at full power. Inside the cockpit, deafening. Hot oil smell mixed with the sharp bite of engine exhaust, G-forces pressed into his seat, harness straps dug into his shoulders. Blood drained from his head, vision tunneled down to a single point, the rear of the Japanese formation, closing fast. He was coming in from above and behind, the classic bounce position, but usually a bounce meant an entire squadron coordinating an attack. This was one man falling out of the sky in a heavy photo plane, about to crash a party he was never invited to. The Japanese fighters flew in a loose V, protecting the bomber in the center, relaxed, lazy, still flying straight and level. Completely unaware that death was closing the distance at 450 miles per hour. Picked his first target. A Tony, one of the fighters on the right flank. It drifted slightly away from the others, the straggler, the weak link. He adjusted the dive, lining up the nose of his Mustang with the tail of the Tony. The gap closed fast, 500 yards. 400. He didn't touch the trigger. An Undertaker's patience. He wanted to be close enough to see the rivets on the enemy's skin. At 300 yards, the Japanese pilot finally noticed something wrong. Maybe a flash of silver in his mirror. Maybe just instinct, the displacement of air as a heavy aircraft bore down from behind. The Tony dipped its left wing, starting a lazy turn to investigate. It was a mistake. The turn exposed the plane's belly. A wide, flat target that filled its gun sight completely. Squeeze the trigger. The 50 caliber machine guns in the wings erupted. Not a bang, a jackhammer tearing up concrete. The heavy plane shook as recoil slowed at mid-dive. Tracers poured out of the wings like fiery ropes connecting the Mustang to the Tony. The bullets didn't just hit the Japanese plane. They ate it. A 50 caliber round, thumb-sized slug of lead and steel moving at nearly 3,000 feet per second. When it struck aluminum, it didn't poke a hole. It ripped the metal apart like wet cardboard. Walked the fire from tail, through cockpit into engine. The Tony shuddered violently. Pieces of the canopy flew off into the slipstream. Then the fuel tanks in the wings ignited, a sudden violent bloom of orange fire that swallowed the aircraft whole. The Tony rolled on its back and dropped out of the formation like a dead bird. Didn't watch it fall. He was already pulling back on the stick, using the momentum of his dive to zoom back up above the formation. One down. The element of surprise was gone, but the confusion was just beginning. The other Japanese pilots saw the fireball, saw the silver flash of the American plane shooting past them, but they didn't react like a disciplined military unit. They reacted like a kicked anthill. Broke formation in every direction, scattered in panic, no coordinated response, no calm assessment. They had no idea how many Americans were attacking. They saw one plane, but logic told them there had to be more. Nobody attacks a squadron with one aircraft. They were searching clouds, twisting their necks, looking for the rest of an American flight, a ghost squadron that didn't exist. Used every second of that chaos. Crested the top of the zoom climb, traded speed for altitude, kicked the rudder pedal hard. The heavy nose of the Mustang swung around. The cameras in the back groaned under the stress, lenses and mirrors rattling inside steel housings. Not what the engineers designed them for. Threw them around the sky like luggage in the back of a truck bouncing over potholes. Didn't care if they broke. If the plane went down, none of it mattered anyway. The second target was already there. A Tony had broken left trying to climb, engine exhaust exposed. The Japanese pilot was trying to gain energy. Too slow. Rolled the Mustang over and dove again. No massive altitude advantage this time, but momentum. Fell on the second fighter before the pilot could finish the climbing turn. Closed to 40 yards. Pistol range. Close enough to see the color of the pilot's helmet. Short burst. Less than 1 second. Economy of violence, didn't spray, painted the target. The round sawed through the right wing. Structure failed instantly. The wing folded up over the fuselage, snapped off with a violence that sent the plane into a flat spin. Centrifugal force pinned the Japanese pilot to the wall of his cockpit, unable to bail out, unable to move. Spinning down into the jungle below. 2 down. Was somewhere in the fight now, trying to stay with his leader, but wasn't flying by the book. He was flying on instinct, bouncing from target to target like a pinball, using the sheer weight and speed of his plane to build momentum in the dives that the lighter Japanese fighters simply couldn't match. The Tonys were nimble, could turn on a dime, but the Mustang was fast, a muscle car drag racing against go-karts. As long as kept his speed up, they couldn't touch him. Was steady, reliable, but he had never seen anything like this. Nobody had. Leveled out and scanned the sky. The still lumbered along in the center of the mess. The remaining fighters were starting to recover, realizing there were only 2 Americans. Panic was turning to anger. They swarmed back toward the bomber, tightening formation, trying to build a defensive wall. Their plan was clear: box the American in, slow him down, use their turning advantage to get on his tail and shred him. 3 lined up to intercept him, fast fighters. Climbed like rockets, carried heavy cannons. These pilots weren't running. They were turning directly into him, daring him to come closer. 3 planes with cannons, 1 plane with machine guns. Game of chicken. The manual said break off, had done enough, 2 kills, formation disrupted, still alive. Could dive away right now, hit full throttle, be back at base in 20 minutes with a hell of a story and 2 confirmed kills. No one would blame him. They would give him a medal just for surviving. Walk into that officer club and finally look the fighter jocks in the eye. But wasn't thinking about the bar, Wasn't thinking about medals. Ammunition plenty, fuel plenty, fear gone. Replaced by cold mechanical focus. The throttle slammed past the stop, war emergency power. The engine screamed, manifold pressure spiked. Black smoke punched from the exhaust stacks, drove the heavy camera-laden plane straight at the three. Not going to dogfight them. Going to run them over. The lead fired first. 40mm shells, not machine gun bullets, explosive rounds. One hit to the engine, and the Mustang was finished. One hit to the cockpit and was going home in a box. Smoke puffed from the wings. Shells zipped past canopy, glowing golf balls whipping through the air. He didn't flinch, didn't weave, held his line exactly straight. Waiting for the range to close. He was betting everything on one thing, that the Japanese pilot would break first. That when he saw a Mustang coming at him like a runaway train, no evasive action, no hesitation, no fear, something inside would scream, "Get out of the way." At 200 yards, the broke. The pilot yanked his stick left, diving to dodge the collision. It was the moment had been waiting for. The brake exposed this engine wide open, clamped down on the trigger. The .50 calibers hammered. The flew directly into the stream of fire. The engine block shattered. The propeller flew off, spinning away into the gray sky like a thrown disc. The fighter stalled instantly, hung in the air for one split second, then dropped like a stone. 3 down. But the energy fight had turned against him. The head-on pass bled off his speed. He was sitting at 200 miles per hour in a plane that needed 300 just to stay dangerous. And behind him, the other two banked hard, coming around fast. They had the speed. They had the angle. They carried the heavy cannons. The tourist had just used up his luck. Now he had to fly. 2 choices. Dive and run, drag the cameras through the air in a desperate race for the clouds, or do something stupid. Fight. Every rule said the cameras would kill him. They nearly did. Every climb, the weight dragged the Mustang down. Every pull-out from a dive, the stick fought his grip. Muscles burning. 4 tons of aluminum that wanted to bury itself in Philippine mud. The cameras made him slow, made him vulnerable, made him exactly what the label promised. A tourist. But something had been happening in every fight so far. Something had felt but hadn't fully understood until this exact second, when the physics of survival became the only thing that mattered. Every time he dove, the Mustang accelerated faster than any Japanese fighter could match, not because of the engine, because of mass. Physics didn't argue with doctrine, didn't care about reputation or labels. In a dive, heavier meant faster. Simple as gravity. The cameras that destroyed his climb rate, that made every pull-out a battle, gave him speed on the way down. Mass carries momentum. The heavier the plane, the faster it falls. The lighter fighters couldn't compete. The cameras weren't just dead weight. In a dive, they were a weapon. The lead settled onto his tail, 500 yards back, pilot lining up the kill shot. Enemy prop spinning a bright yellow circle behind him. Slammed the throttle forward and hauled the stick back, kicking the left rudder hard. The Mustang snapped into a rolling scissors, a corkscrew designed for lightweight dogfighters, not for a plane carrying half a ton of camera equipment. The airframe shuddered. Rivets screamed against aluminum skin. The cameras in the tail groaned under stress that would have torn a lesser airframe apart. But the pilot wasn't expecting the tourist to fight. He came in too fast, greedy for the kill. When slammed on the brakes with tight corkscrew turns that couldn't slow down in time, overshot. Slid right past canopy, so close he could see oil stains on the enemy fuselage. Hunter became prey in one heartbeat. Reversed the turn, slammed the stick right. The heavy nose swung around. He didn't wait for a perfect picture. Put the nose exactly where there was going to be, held the trigger down. Tracers walked straight into the cockpit. Glass shattered inward. Dead hands froze on the controls. The fighter pitched up, stalled, and fell away into the overcast. 4 down. The second saw his wingman die. Broke hard right, diving for the cloud layer below. Thought he could lose the heavy American plane in the gray mist. Wrong. Push the nose over. Let gravity do the work. The Mustang picked up speed like a freight train on a downhill grade. The cameras in the tail, the weight that made every climb a fight, now pulled him down faster than the lighter could fall. Mass carried momentum. The heavier plane won the race to the bottom. He caught the fighter just as it touched the edge of the clouds. The Japanese pilot jinked left, then right, trying to shake the aim. Didn't chase the wiggles, aimed for the center of mass. Fired one long disciplined burst. The rounds chewed through the tail section. Elevator controls snapped. Lost the ability to fly level, nosed over and drove straight into the jungle canopy at 300 miles per hour. No fire, just a cloud of green debris and brown dirt as the aircraft disintegrated into the trees. 5 down. Pulled up, gasping for air. Cockpit smell, hot oil, cordite sweat. Flight suit soaked through, arms trembling from wrestling the stick. He checked his clock. Less than 3 minutes since the first shot. 5 aircraft destroyed. But the sky wasn't empty yet. The bomber was running. While it had been fighting the bodyguards, the bomber dropped to 50 feet above the treetops, hugging terrain, banking around hills, heading for anti-aircraft cover at the next airfield. The pilot was good. Low, fast, using the dark green jungle as camouflage against his own dark green paint. The Queen was still alive. Banked the Mustang and pushed the throttle again. Engine temperature gauge climbed into the red, manifold pressure off the charts. He was abusing the machine, asking the Merlin to give him everything it had and then some. The engine screamed in protest, but it delivered. He closed the gap, and then the tail gunner opened up. A 20mm cannon started pumping explosive shells at him from the back of the bomber. These weren't machine gun bullets. These were shells that could tear the Mustang apart with a single hit. If one struck the engine, was walking home through enemy jungle. If one hit the cockpit, he wasn't walking anywhere. He saw the muzzle flashes, saw the tracers drifting toward him. He didn't weave. Weaving scrubbed speed off, and he needed every mile per hour to catch the bomber. Instead, he made tiny, microscopic adjustments with the rudder, just enough to spoil the gunner's aim without losing momentum. Shells whipped past his wings. Supersonic cracks snapped the air around the cockpit. He needed to silence that gun. At 400 yards, squeezed the trigger. Not a long burst, just a tap. A range check. The tracers fell short, dipping under the bomber's tail. He pulled the nose up, 1 fraction of an inch, squeezed again. The burst hit the tail turret, glass shattered. The 20mm cannon stopped firing. The tail gunner was gone. Kept the throttle forward. Walked the fire up the fuselage of the bomber. Pieces of metal flew off the green skin. Fabric of the rudder shredded in the wind. But there was a tough old airframe. It kept flying. He drifted his aim to the right, targeted the starboard engine, held the trigger down. 6 guns roared, vibrating the entire Mustang. Hundreds of rounds poured into the engine mount. The engine didn't just fail, it detonated. White-hot magnesium fire erupted from the cowling. The propeller sheared off and cartwheeled into the jungle below. Fire spread instantly to the wing fuel tank. The entire right side of the bomber turned into a torch. Wing structure melted in seconds. The heavy wing folded up, and the bomber rolled violently into the dead engine. It hit the trees with the force of a bomb. A massive fireball mushroomed up from the jungle floor. Greasy black smoke boiled into the sky. The shock wave rattled canopy as he flew over the wreckage. The Queen was dead. 6 down. Banked hard, checked his 6. Expected empty sky, expected the fight was over. One last Tony had been hiding in the clouds, waiting. Classic ambush. Let the enemy get greedy, fixate on the big target, then strike while he's watching the fireball. The fighter came diving out of the overcast. Guns blazing. Bullets sparked off swing, punching jagged holes in the aluminum skin. The Mustang shuddered with each impact. Didn't think, he reacted. Hauled the stick into a tight left turn, pulling so many G's that his vision grayed at the edges. The Tony pilot tried to follow, but he was moving too fast from his dive. Couldn't bleed off speed. Slid to the outside of the turn. Fatal error. Chopped the throttle, dropped the flaps. The Mustang slowed down instantly like a barn door catching wind. The Tony flew right past him, unable to stop in time. Retracted the flaps, slammed the throttle forward and tucked in behind the enemy. 50 yards. Close enough to see the pilot's head turning, looking back. He pressed the trigger. Click. Nothing. His heart stopped. Thousands of rounds fired in 6 minutes. The magazines had to be empty. He was 50 yards from the enemy, perfectly lined up, and his guns were dead. He cycled the gun switch, checked the circuit breakers. Everything showed green, a jam, a stoppage somewhere in the feed mechanism. Or empty magazines, he couldn't tell which. He slammed his fist against the instrument panel, hard. The vibration rattled through the entire airframe. Maybe that would jar something loose. Maybe the feed motor just needed a shock. He squeezed the trigger again, holding his breath. The guns roared back to life. Tracers lashed out and found the tony dead center in the fuselage. The cockpit disintegrated. The plane pitched down violently, tumbled end over end, slammed into a rice field below. 7 down. Pulled up into vertical, climbed away from the burning jungle. He scanned the sky, left, right, high, low. Nothing, empty. 7 pillars of black smoke rose from the green canopy below. His hands shook on the stick, uncontrollable. Adrenaline crash hit like a wall. He keyed the radio. "You okay?" His breathless reply came back. "Good, 3 stragglers down." "Good work, let's go home." When the wheels touched the runway, it was just another landing to the ground crew. They didn't know what was sitting in that cockpit. Shut down the engine, climbed out onto the wing. Legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The crew chief ran up, stopped, looked at the wings, burned black, red fabric patches shredded to nothing, powder residue stained the metal. Jagged bullet holes punched through the skin, where Japanese fire had tried to find the man inside. He looked up held up 7 fingers. The intelligence officer in the debriefing room stopped writing when gave him the numbers. 1 bomber, 6 fighters, 7 kills, less than 6 minutes. The timeline was impossible. It sounded like hallucinations from a man who had cracked under pressure. Didn't argue, didn't pound the table. He was an Undertaker. He dealt in bodies, not words. "Develop the film," he said. The projector hummed. The room went dark. Black and white, grainy, shaking with the vibration of gun recoil. First plane filled the frame, fireball. Second wing folded. Gone in 1 second. Third engine shattered. Propeller spun away into gray sky. One after another, 7 distinct kills. The footage didn't lie, didn't brag, just showed the truth. When the reel ended, nobody said a word. The intelligence officer sat in the dark, mouth open. The tourist myth died right there in that tent. Received the Medal of Honor. But the real legacy was the record. 7 kills, 6 minutes. In the entire history of aerial warfare, no pilot has ever done it faster. Not the great aces, not the legends, nobody. After the war, he lived quietly. No books, no fame. Treated his 6 minutes of glory the same way he had treated his work as a mortician, with dignity and a quiet respect for the reality of death. It's not the plane that makes the ace. It's the man in the cockpit and the decision he makes when every rule says turn away. The Undertaker is always waiting for new customers.